This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, NIL Game Changers, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And the opening half hour brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and out every day. 6 great flavors of slushies in the pickle bar, led by my two personal favorites, the barrels and the dills. Indeed, second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. We open up the show in a big way by bringing in Ryan Snyder on 3.com, Blue White Illustrated. First of all, how are you and your family doing?
Doing well, Steve. Been a little while. It's always a hectic 6 weeks, trying to be a dad in June when school's out and also cover recruiting, which is insane in the month of June and into July. But I'm not complaining, right? I got a cool job, so doing well. Can't complain, man.
I will get to the recruiting part in a moment. You closely follow television. What kind of quandary has it been for Penn State with a whiteout game in conjunction with the networks? Yeah, this has been a popular topic lately, right? And, I feel like it's been a popular topic for a couple years now, but James and even Pat Kraft have been kind of outspoken in some interviews we've done with them recently about how the Big Ten could maybe help Penn State out a little bit when it comes to having big time games in the evening when they want their whiteout. So we don't really know officially when Ohio State will be, but I think everybody kind of understands that that'll probably be penciled in for noon. And, between UCLA and Washington, again, we don't really know those times officially yet, but the fact that people have been kind of outspoken about it kind of leads you to believe that maybe they aren't going to be night games. Or at least with UCLA. We'll see. Washington's late in the year. Who knows, with those November games. But, it's been interesting, man, because this is not something that Penn State wants. But, at the same time, all of these Big Ten schools, except for the new ones, of course, are getting paid out pretty handsomely. And hey, look, if you look at Big Noon's ratings, they've been pretty solid. So it's going to be interesting. I think Penn State certainly wants the Big Ten and Fox and NBC and CBS to kind of work with them a little bit more moving forward. But, when it comes to this year specifically, I'm not sure exactly what all they can do. Yeah, it should be pointed out that of the top 15 rated college football games last season, 7 of them took place in the noon hour. So, so that's the Fox point of view. The Penn State point of view is they're number 6 in total viewership from 2016 to 2023, and they happen to be one of the 18 schools that make up 50% of the TV ratings. So both sides have an argument.
Right. And that's why we're at a quandary.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting, man. I think I could see a route down the road where maybe the networks will work with them a little bit. The whiteout is still absolutely a desired telecast. But, if you want that to be Ohio State, if you want that to be Michigan, even maybe an Oregon or some other team that's very prominent, USC, of course, now, look, Fox is always going to have the opportunity to take those games very early. Just the way this draft works and all types of little details that we could spend all day about. I don't know if it's going to come down to Fox kind of putting his tail between his legs and letting NBC, jump the line for one of those games. We saw that this year. That's been kind of announced already publicly that, Fox kind of gave NBC an opportunity to move up a little bit in the draft while they got later games. I think Fox got 2 out of that. It was like a 2-for-1 kind of trade with NBC. Maybe we see something like that moving forward. Maybe we see the Big Ten kind of give a little bit there with Penn State. Of course, the Michigan, Ohio State, and that game always being at noon is what Franklin kind of keeps pointing to. So we will see. But right now, I feel like that's a fix that they could maybe make in 2025, 2026, something that can be negotiated or talked about here in the next, coming months. But for this season, I kind of just feel like it's a little too late for much to change. I mean, the draft's already been done, and Penn State has to figure out what game. I mean, there's a reason Penn State hasn't announced their whiteout yet, or any of their their themes for this year. And I think a lot of it comes down to they know that they don't have a lot of great options for what they really want, and we'll see if that comes soon. I know they want to get that out soon, but there's a reason they've been taking a little while to put it out there.
I want to ask you one more TV question, then I'll get to the recruiting part. Everyone talks about realignment. We know about Florida State and how vocal they've been about they need to leave the ACC and so forth. In reality, Ryan, how much TV money is actually left out there? Because contracts are already signed, and it's not a bottomless pit of money across the board. I mean, doesn't common sense enter into this argument at some point? Because there seems to be a lot of emotion and no common sense.
For sure. Absolutely. I think that's a great point. I mean, look, let's be honest. I mean, there was a lot of talk that Fox wanted in on the 12-team college playoff. Why didn't they get in? It's not really been out there too much publicly, but I think it's a lot had to do with the fact that they added a couple schools to the Big Ten, and money is tight. And we've already seen what ESPN's had to do in different ways and cut staff or whatever it may be in different ways to be able to pay out those television contracts that, don't get me wrong, the NBA is going to get more. The NBA is about to be up. I think there's one other, it's not NFL, NHL's good. I think the NBA is the other big one that's coming up there as far as ESPN.
They're going to, in essence, they're going to double the number from 1.4 to 2.8 billion per year. Because for ESPN, there's a nice to have and there's a must have. Well, the NBA is a must have, so they had to pay for it. For sure. And I mean, look, there's I have questions, Steve. Has the 14-team playoff been worked out? Like, is that all still with ESPN, or is it just the 12-team? Have they figured out like the college football playoff will be with ESPN 14 through like 2030s? Did I miss that? Yeah,
or not?
Now that part's been worked out. Now whether it gets to 14 or not, I think they're still debating it. But the long-term contract's been worked out with ESPN, and they in turn are going to farm out 2 of the games in the 12-team playoff to TNT.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, look, unless if Turner decides they want to really get in on some of this college football action, maybe they do. We'll see. Obviously, right now they only have 2 college football playoff games. But, no, the money is a great point. And I don't really see, we'll see what happens with the ACC and all that. But ESPN, usually it's at least for like the Big Ten and the SEC, it was the television companies kind of in their corner to some degree to do this realignment. Well, what reason does ESPN have to do that? They have one of the sweetest deals ever with prominent schools like Clemson and Florida State and North Carolina and some others. And, that's the difference between the ACC situation and the SEC Big Ten situation is, man, because that's such a long contract, there's nobody really in their corner to back them up. And maybe Florida State and Clemson can throw a hand grenade in there and blow it all up. But until that happens, the ball just isn't really in their court, if that makes sense.
All right, so we all know that June is such an active time recruiting-wise. You have on-campus visits all over the place. Penn State's been reeling in players, not just getting commitments for the upcoming year, but even a year beyond that. What's been your take as to how Penn State has handled it, and what's the positional balance that they have with what they've done?
Yeah, I mean, positionally wise, they're pretty well set as far as the balance goes. They need to add maybe a couple receivers. We'll love to get a defensive lineman in there. They're shooting really high for a top linebacker like Ty Jackson. Down in Georgia, we'll see where that goes. But for the most part, the class is pretty much set. Multiple corners, 2 safeties. I can go through the list. Maybe they would have liked to have got another offensive lineman, but Phil Troutwine has also pulled in some quality guys in recent years, and I don't think he's just going to take someone to take someone, if that makes sense when it comes to offensive tackle moving forward. So from that perspective, it's been good. They've really done a good job nationally too. That's maybe the big difference between what we've seen kind of in recent years and this year. 2 guys out of California. One, of course, is a Vars kid, so I don't know how much we want to include that as far as like a true California commitment. But Darius Dixon, of course, plays at Mater Dei. Troy Hune, who you alluded to, really good 2026 quarterback prospect, a top 100 player. out of Mission Hills, which is closer to San Diego. So you're seeing those. They got a kid out of Kansas. I don't know when the last time Penn State got a player out of Kansas, but Jaden Woods, really good defensive end. We'll see where things progress there. But I think it kind of speaks to the growth of their recruiting staff over the last couple of years and the work that they're able to put in as far as developing those relationships with coaches at different schools, building up that trust over a couple of years. So then when you do have top players emerge, well, hey, man, they've got a really good relationship with Kenny Sanders or Alan Zamitis or, all these recruiting staff guys. And, of course, that kind of snowballs into the coaching staff as well. So I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway for what we've seen here in recent weeks is really just kind of the spreading of their wings and being able to pull off some of those guys that, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago felt very unlikely. And even to some degree, Darius Dixon committing from Modern Day, like that was one of those ones where it surprised me pretty much right until the moment it happened.
Right. Everything goes in cycles. So there are some years where Pennsylvania has some decent depth in it, and you need to mine the talent. There are other years where it's a bit shallow, so you have to go other places to find it. Where is Pennsylvania in this particular cycle?
I think it's about mid-range. What I would say about PA is the top's been pretty good. And the issue that I think a lot of fans would point to is that a lot of the top guys ended up elsewhere. Matt Zollers is a really good quarterback out of Springford. We have him as a 5-star. He ended up at Missouri.
Yep.
Zahir Mathis, Michael Carroll, Andrew Olish, 3 really good players. Mathis is an edge rusher. Carroll's an O-lineman. Olish is a tight end. They've all picked other schools. What's interesting, first off, we've seen this happen before. If you go back to that 2021 class, Nolan Rucci goes to Wisconsin, McCord and Marvin Harrison go to Ohio State. Like this does happen every handful of years, and there's a lot of different things you can point to. Sometimes just the class has a lot of players that for one reason or another want to spread their wings. They want to go elsewhere.
Right.
I think what we're kind of seeing a little bit this year too, though, is the impact of NIL and just how much it is giving guys a reason to think or want to maybe go elsewhere. Penn State's NIL's okay. It's gotten a lot better, and it's fine. I don't want to make it out to be like it's terrible because I think a lot of people made it out to be terrible. It's not. But when you have a guy like Matt Zollers, who's an incredible quarterback, well, look, everybody, if you follow this closely, Missouri's NIL collective is one of the best out there now, and it's very well organized, and the way they go about different things, like they have the resources to really make an impression. I think that was part of Zollers' decision to go there. Same with Michael Carroll going to Alabama. There's a lot of different guys that, man, if you really look at the top 100 recruits or so in the country, NIL's having a massive impact on them. And then we're seeing in some ways that benefited, maybe not the top tier Georgias and Alabamas, and then some years it kind of helps those kind of schools. And I feel like we're kind of seeing that circle back this year with some of these prominent guys, at least in our region, circling down to some of those SEC schools or some bigger schools that have been very outspoken about the fact that they are going to be incredibly aggressive from an NIL and recruiting perspective. So, the good thing for Penn State is they got 4 or 5 months to try and flip some of these guys, too. I don't know about the PA guys too much. They seem pretty firm. But there's certainly some guys in Maryland who have ended up elsewhere that I know they really like, and they'll continue to chip away at that. But I think Penn State fans, it's funny. I'm going on a tangent real quick. The whole dominate the state conversation, right? Remember, that was 10 years ago. Like, so much has changed since then, and just not just from NIL, but just in the way recruiting staffs are built and how big these staffs are. There is a part of me that feels like fans probably put too much stock into that comment nowadays. They want to point to it when they want to point fingers and do this and that. But, at the end of the day, as long as you're getting talent, which Penn State's doing a fine job with, they're pretty much on pace to finish where they've always finished, at least in recent years, 10 or probably 12, 15 kind of range. As long as you're stacking talent, I don't know how much it really matters that it's from your home state. It's great when it is, right? And fans get excited about that, and they can go watch those guys on Friday nights and watch their careers and all that. But, they're also pulling guys from Arkansas, Florida, California, and all these other places that, 6, 7, 8 years ago, that wasn't always the case. So just keep bringing in talent, keep developing guys. I think at the end of the day, they'll be just fine.
Yeah, every time Drew Aller throws the ball out of the backfield to Katron Allen or tosses one to Trey Wallace, wouldn't get too worked up. All right, none of them are Pennsylvania guys. Okay, Tyler Warren, not a PA guy. I don't worry about that part, because when James made that statement, Penn State is in the throes of sanctions at that moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to have context to what things mean along the way. So,
right.
And go from there. When you look at the number of guys that they have, and the fact they pushed back this early signing thing to now after the last regular season game, why is it that the SEC, along with the Southern high school coaches, don't want it pushed back to, like, say, June 30th, for example? Why don't they? Because I don't know. Those are the two roadblocks because college basketball's made it work forever.
It's a great question. I've been trying to dig on that. I don't know if you've been able to dig on that. I don't. I'm trying to understand it more. I don't know if it has much to do with, the schools kind of start. Well, no, because if it's in June, like, I would understand if it was maybe late July, because that's down south. They do start a little earlier, but sure. June, I don't understand it at all. And there's got to be some sort of reason. I think maybe to some degree it's because the SEC knows, or at least for the most part, that those schools have more financial backing than others, so maybe they want to flip guys. And they see it as like, look, we have resources here that can probably allow us to get top players committed elsewhere that other schools who don't have those resources currently hold commitments from. But that's a lazy excuse, though, and a lazy way to look at it. I'm sure there's things I'm not thinking about where, some of the more northern schools we're not even talking Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, but, the Purdue's, the Indianas, all those kind of schools of the world, they're looking for those late bloomers senior year. So, they're filling in guys that maybe we're not talking about, we're not thinking about right now, and maybe those SEC schools can pull off talented players off the top of those classes, right? The guys that are kind of marquee. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't get it. I don't understand it at all. I've always been in favor of a June signing period, or just any sort of summer signing period, because
I agree.
Again, Penn State has 22 commits right now. Like, the fact that they got to babysit these guys now for however many months and worry about this or that or visit here and there, it doesn't really help the recruit because it kind of fills their brain sometimes and their families with too many thoughts that they overthink it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then, just the amount of work that the recruiting staff and all the coaches have to put in, to not really visiting guys, but maybe going out and watching high school games, things like that. It just doesn't. I don't understand the benefit of it in 2024. I understood it a little. I would have understood it way more in 2014 and other times where stats just weren't as big and different things like that. But nowadays it makes no sense.
Once the House settlement is approved by Judge Claudia Wilken, Penn State is going to be one of those that will pay the $22 million total, and however they want to dole it out. And that's going to be the low number in all this. It's going to go up at some point. But not every school can afford to do that. You and I both know that. I mean, in the Big 12 and in the ACC, you're going to tell me they can afford to find $22 million? How interested are you on the domino as to what that can mean in recruiting?
I'm torn on that, Steve, because I agree with everything you just said there. Like, it doesn't make sense on paper for, like, a school like Maryland, for example. Yeah, what was their profit last year? Like $80 million, or maybe where Penn State was like 120 or something like that. Like, there's a big, maybe not even 80 for Maryland. That actually be lower than that. But at the same time, and if you are committed to being a big time football school, right? Like, how do you not do that? Because here's the deal: is collectives aren't going away. Right. So if you don't commit to that $22 million, you're putting yourself in a bigger hole. In my opinion, it's going to be even tougher than it is right now to compete against some of the big dogs out there.
That's right.
So I'm torn on it, Steve. Like, I think what you're saying is right. Like, no way all of those schools will pay all $22 million, but I don't understand how 90% of them don't, especially if you're in the Big Ten or the SEC. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that won't. I guess with Big 12 ACC, it's a little different with their television contracts.
I'm interested to see which sports end up going to club sports at some of those schools in order to curb costs to do exactly what we just talked about. I think that's at least a scenario to consider.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. I don't know if Penn State will ever get to that point, but the money is substantial. And, you know, a school like Penn State would never want to do that. But
right.
The money's incredible. I mean, but like the one thing I keep telling fans is, like, if you think that this change is going to fix everything, I don't see that happening. Because look, at the end of the day, Maryland now can spend $22 million potentially.
That's right.
Rutgers can do that. Like, it just makes the pot deeper. It doesn't really widen the gap, in my opinion, or make a Penn State higher up on the chain. Maybe it will. Maybe I'll be wrong, and a lot of these schools will pay, only have $10, $15 million to put into that stuff. But I just don't understand that with all this conference realignment and the schools wanting to be basically in these big three, of course, big four with the ACC, but we'll see what happens there. Like, if you're fully committed to that and you've positioned your school to be in that position, anything less than $22 million, if I'm the coaching staff or recruiting staff or anything like that, that would really frustrate me and not be a winning strategy.
Always a winning strategy to have you on. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Ryan. Thanks for the time.
No problem, Steve. Last bash at the end of the month. Reach out then.
Ryan Snyder, and we will reach out at the end of the month for Last Bash. From On3.com, Blue White Illustrated. This half hour brought to you by our great friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drink, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and out every day. Pickle bar, led by the barrels and the dills, indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket, here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is, because it's Brewers Outlet time. The beverage supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
Hi, this is Season. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855. Visit our website at purdyinsurance.com or check us out on Facebook to see what we can do for you.